Hello!
This is Matt.
And Emily from Scarecrow Video in Seattle, Washington. Did you know that we have the largest video collection in the world? We have over 146,000 titles and growing. That's over 3 times more than Netflix, Amazon, Max, and Hulu combined.
Plus, Scarecrow now offers rent-by-mail service throughout the U.S., so check out scarecrowvideo.org for details. You can catch Emily and I, or Matt and I, if that was going to be you saying that, on our bi-weekly YouTube show, Viva Physical Media, for video recommendations and so much more.
See ya!
Bye!
Hello there, and welcome back to the Disconnected. I'm here with Michelle Kisner, who is a writer, contributor on multiple physical media releases, and also a local critic in her scene. Michelle, thanks for doing this.
Oh, I appreciate you asking me on. It's an honor, actually. I've watched other episodes of this because you have a lot of cool people on here. So I was like, wow, he's asking me.
Wow, I had no idea. That's amazing to hear. I mean, honestly, I can't even remember what clued me onto you in the first place. It might have just been Kat Ellinger knowing who you were, and through it seems like her tendrils get into people, and then suddenly the network just grows and grows.
Yeah, she's like one of my favorite people in the scene too. Just like really nice and down to earth and like easy to talk to and willing to, lend out a helping hand for people that are like new into the scene. Cause it's kind of hard to get into this kind of like area because everybody's very protective. Cause it's like kind of like, I don't know, it's like a little bit of like a gig economy too. And some people do this as their entire job. So, all their income is from doing these type of things. So, there's that kind of dynamic going on. And I have a day job, so it's not as economically important for me. I'm just doing this as more like, I just enjoy writing about films. Not saying they don't either, but the money aspect isn't like in consideration for me. So I see why it's like that, but she's great about getting new people into the scene that, might like be overlooked. So
yeah, it for certain people, it definitely can be a competitive arena, unfortunately. But either way, there's lots of ways that we've seen multiple new people come onto the scene over the last handful of years. And I've appreciated all of your pieces I've been able to read so far. You've got a couple coming out. So yeah, I absolutely wanted to have you on. One of the things that I first just want to ask, like, how did you first get into film? Because obviously you've got a pretty wide breadth of knowledge on it.
So, growing up, I'm 43. So I'm like an elder millennial. I'm like the oldest you can be and be a millennial still. I grew up in a small town, had a little mom and pop rental shop, but mostly Blockbuster was the main thing. I grew up in Idaho, so it was like kind of like middle of nowhere. So Blockbuster was the perfect, middle of nowhere places. That's where their bread and butter was because they were the only game in town. But I just love movies. My father actually was a huge movie buff. He's passed away, but he would watch every single movie that came out in the theater. He always had like the newest, whatever was out at the time, like the newest VHS player. I remember he was always doing the thing where like you had the 2 VCRs and he would like rent movies and then burn them on to the other movies. So like we had a huge collection of those EP, VHS with 5 movies on each one that took forever to get to the movie that you wanted to watch. He also loved horror, and I, from a very young age, was exposed to all types of horror movies. Probably some I shouldn't have been, but it just instilled in me this huge love of horror and cult films.
Nice. Honestly, it's astonishingly close to the way I grew up. I grew up in a very small town with mostly just Blockbuster and then another tiny little mom and pop. But either way, like, it's such a small population. The only way, at least in my town, they could stay open was mostly offering the super mainstream films. So I never got a lot of the indie underground things until I was older and could seek them out myself. So yeah, those small towns, Blockbuster was king for sure. But you've got just the ones that you've written on so far. It seems like we're going to get into individual titles, but what was the first one that you contributed to, actually?
The first one, I have them like in a stack next to my thing, so I could remember. The first one I ever contributed to was Tangerine for Second Sight. And that was the one, yeah, that one right there. That's the Kat got produced that one, and
Yep.
she asked me to write for them, and I was very honored because I love Tangerine. I love that movie, and that was the first one. You know, it was very stressful to me because I was like, man, this is like my big chance. I got to really, you know, write a good essay. So I was like just toiling over this essay, just editing it, and you know, and she was very like open about like, here's some things that could help. You know, it was a fantastic experience all the way around. And then I don't know, it just was this crazy thing that they sent me my you know, my contributors copy, and I was like, this is like a permanent like you know, version of this movie that people will own, and my name will be
Right.
in it, and they'll you know, it's just a cool way, I feel like, to contribute to this medium I love so much, which is cinema. Like I would, you know, write about it. Let's extol the virtues of it. Let's, you know, open these movies up and expose them to everybody. And I after I did that first one, I was like, this is where my passion lies.
I adore Sean Baker. He is somebody that I've been honored to have on the channel before. And when I first heard that this was coming out, I pre-ordered it day one. This is like one of those dream releases. Never thought anybody would give this much respect to Tangerine. And then your essay in this is astonishing. For somebody that I clearly had never heard of before this, it is such a great dive into who Sean is on his sets from everything that I've heard,
Mm-hmm.
and really gives a deep dive into what is to come from him, because so much of his stuff is you know, even diving to like candid camera stuff where there's real people mixing with the actors.
Yes.
And not many people are doing that, and the way that you write about it, it captured it perfectly. So I can see why people wanted you to continue, clearly. One thing that I had to ask, because you, like me, are not really attached to a giant film city. We're not, you know, in LA or New York, and it can feel quite different from everything I've been told. And I'd like to hear from your perspective. Do you get any sense of how isolating this industry can be? Because that's one thing I think from the outside looking in, people can't really grasp until they've actually worked as part of it.
Yeah, so yeah, the area, my region is the Detroit region. And I love the city of Detroit. I don't live in Detroit. I live about, I'd say like 30 minutes outside of it, but in the suburbs called Metro Detroit. But I do go to Detroit all the time. I was just in Detroit yesterday, in fact. The thing is, when you're a critic in a smaller city, you're oftentimes like the last that they think of. So LA and New York and those kind of big cities, they go straight to them. And then we get kind of like whatever they want to give us. Like for the most part, we get a lot of the big Hollywood, big studio press screenings. Like I still, you know, work as like a regular critic on top of being like the freelance essay writer type thing. And it's just that, I guess, and it kind of made me realize where my passion lied. Because when you're a critic, especially in the big cities, when you're in those big critic groups, there's a kind of a little bit of expectation that you're helping Hollywood out, and they repay you by, hey, you can come to this party and take a picture with Tom Hanks or something like that. But like that's not, I love actors and stuff, but that's not the part of the film that, like, I just don't care about meeting famous people and all that kind of stuff. You know, half the time it's like, don't meet your heroes anyways. I would rather just know them as their characters, right? I don't want to schmooze with them. I don't need a picture with them. I don't need pull quotes all the time. Not to say there's anything wrong with that, but it's just not my jam, I guess. I would rather write about a film in a different type of way than just trying to get on the movie poster or, you know, be an influencer and have them send me free stuff. Like that's kind of not the part of criticism that I like. Which is nice when you are in a smaller region. It's you don't have to deal with that as much because they're not sending Tom Cruise over to Detroit to, you know, promote a movie, right? He's going to be in LA. So you just get the movies, right? And you just get the press screenings, which is okay by me. That's all I want. I just want the movies. I don't want all the stuff around them. I'm kind of a private person a little bit. I'm very introverted. So I don't like doing interviews with famous people. I'd say no to those kind of things. I don't like doing commentaries because I think I have a weird voice and I just get nervous and I have a lot of anxiety and stuff. I just want to write it down and you read it. That's that's the thing I like to do.
With that, do you have any fun or interesting stories so far of people discovering your writing on any of these physical releases that you've just been touched by and seen them respond to?
It's kind of funny because sometimes like I'm in a lot of film collecting groups because I also collect films, and sometimes I'll see somebody post like that they enjoyed a certain release that I worked on, and they like the essay, and I'm like, oh hey, that was me, and they're like, oh, like yeah, they get a little excited, like I don't want to be a celebrity or anything like that, but it's just nice to know that somebody read what you wrote and enjoyed it and it touched them, and I have a pretty active Facebook page, and I get a lot of feedback through that. Like people will get the release and they'll DM me, and say, hey, I got this release and I read your essay and it was great. I never thought about these certain aspects, or it's a movie that they've loved their whole life that they could never find, and finally gets like a 4K, crazy release, and they're just like, wow, this movie I loved. I've never seen it like this before. I've never seen it so pristine and given so much care, and now everybody's writing about it, and it's more like one-on-one. I get that type of feedback, less so like getting acknowledged in a wider sense.
Yeah, which it definitely can make it seem sort of isolating, and sometimes just seeing paying attention to how people review some of these. Quite often, the reviews for the physical releases will be like, here's how the film looked, and these are the special features. Nothing about the special features. So it's always nice for people to pay extra close attention to those and actually write about what they got out of those as well.
Yeah, because I actually write reviews sometimes too for movies in that way, and I always try to say something about every single little piece that somebody contributed, even just to say, hey, I enjoyed it. Like it doesn't. I don't need to like break it down in like a 5-paragraph thing about a booklet, but I'll just say, hey, I read it and I enjoyed this take that you had on it, and that's that. And I enjoy when I read somebody else's review and they just give me a little nod, like, hey, I read her essay and I liked it, and I'm like, sweet.
Well, you mentioned some of these titles getting a crazy 4K release, and one of the big ones you've been able to write on is Daryl from Vinegar Syndrome. This getting a VSU is still wild to me. The fact that somebody took the time and energy and the money. I mean, the fact that this takes so much work to make a release like this, and you got to be a part of it. And in your essay, you're talking about how you saw it when you were so young, and I just love stories like that. So, I mean, how do you feel about something that affected you when you were younger? Now, 3.5 decades later, you get to write and share that passion with the world.
I know, when I got an email asking me if I wanted to contribute to Daryl, I was like over the moon. I was like, what? Because Daryl's one of those core memory style movies for me, where it's just this little aspect of it just stuck in my brain forever. And it was the pole position part where he's playing it and he's going around and he's like crazy good at it. I don't know why that stuck in my head, but the funny thing about it is when I wrote that essay, I had so many people contact me and say that exact thing was stuck in my head, and some of them were like, I thought I made that up. I didn't think it was an actual movie. I thought it was like a fever dream, or I've been trying to find out what the hell this movie was where I saw this kid playing this game for so long, and now I figured it out, like through that. But it's just fantastic. Especially I love revisiting films where, I saw them as a kid and I have this really strong memory about it. And then I rewatch it with a different eye, which is the critical eye, and I find most of the time they're richer than I remember. There's so much stuff I missed as a child, so much, context and subtext and all this kind of thing. And they're just, it opens the film up into a completely new film almost to me. And that happened with Daryl because, I hadn't seen Daryl in a really long time. And that's why I jumped. I was like, man, I would love to write about that and really, interrogate with myself why I had this memory of it. And when I rewatched it, I was like, wow, there's actually a lot of cool stuff going on in Daryl. I mean, yeah, it's like, a cheesy 80s movie at the end of the day. It's a little goofy, it's for kids, but there's a lot of deeper themes going on in that film, that I never noticed as a child.
Well, one of the things that really jumped out about your essays, you write about autism a little bit and how the DoD specifically is a part of this and messing with the scientific side of things. And that it is super personal to me for multiple reasons. I got 2 kids diagnosed with autism. And then my first job with the government was with the DoD. And knowing, nowadays you and I are both federal employees, how do you how do you feel, writing about something that you're technically kind of a part of?
Yeah, because so I used to be in the military. I was in the Air Force for 10 years, and I did air traffic control then. And then I got out of the military, and now I work for the Air National Guard, and I still do air traffic control, but as a civilian on the DoD side. So I've seen like how military mind works from the inside, and I've also seen how it works from the civilian side. So, and you know, and I don't want to. And a lot of people will, have issues with you working for the federal government, and I get it because the federal government does some shady shit all the time.
Yeah.
So I get it, but I gotta pay the bills. I gotta exist within capitalism. Maybe I could do a different job, but it's the only job I know how to do, to be honest. So and it's like a really technical thing, and we're in high demand. So, but it was just interesting to see, Daryl's. The thing with Daryl is they're trying to make Daryl into a weapon when he's just a child, and they don't understand why he is the way he is when he's just becoming human. And to become human is to gain empathy, and to gain empathy is to not want to kill anyone. So they messed up, I guess, with Daryl by making him a child, because the way a child sees the world is just through love and compassion. And I was just really drawn to the idea of Daryl becoming more and more human as the film progressed, and the DoD losing their control over him because they can't control the human spirit. They can only control money and items, and it's also like the idea of like when you're working at a job and like your body is like the physical labor. They own your body, basically. They own the labor that you are giving them for 8 hours a day or whatever. And when you're in the military or you work for the feds, like it's even more so. They own you. They own everything about you. You're just a number to them. You're nothing to them, and they will replace you immediately to get the mission done, right? So I just thought it was an interesting angle with Daryl that I'd never thought of as a kid, because I was just a kid. But now that I'm an adult that's got more knowledge, I was like, wow, there's like a whole other world going on in this film that I never really saw before.
Right. That's perfect segue, because you had mentioned your Facebook page is pretty active, and that is my only interaction with you so far before this moment today is through your Facebook page. And everything that you've written, all of your interactions with people, there's something about it that's so welcoming. And there's a lot of people in the film community that gatekeep the shit out of everything, and I hate it. And one thing I'd love to hear your take on, as somebody from a smaller town, how do you feel about film criticism, the state overall of film criticism in 2024? Because obviously you can view it as watered down through the internet. Essentially, you can view it as being hot take heavy. You can view it as people just doing, clickbait headlines. There's so many different bad things that can happen. But overall, film criticism seems to be richer than ever if you find the right people. So I just love to hear what you think on that.
So one of the good things about film criticism now, I think, is that it's more diverse. There are more voices. Sometimes you'll hear older film critics, like a lot older, like maybe like in the boomer kind of generation, a little Gen X. I guess there's some dismay about the idea that anyone can be a film critic now. I'm a perfect example of this. I didn't go to college for film. I couldn't afford it. We were poor when I was growing up. But I literally, when I started writing seriously, I wanted more knowledge. So I just went online and looked at a film course and looked at the curriculum, and I just bought those books and read them. Like, I can't afford college, but I can afford, secondhand books. And then you go online, there's a huge resource of like, you can look up any type of subject and get like as much knowledge as you want for free, essentially.
Oh yeah.
So there's no gatekeeping now with like, you have to have a college degree or a journalism degree. Not to say that those aren't important, because they are, but there's, anybody can be a film critic. You can start a blog, watch a film, write about it, post, bam, you got a review up, and you're a film critic. You could be the least knowledgeable film critic ever, but you're still a film critic. You still have you have a view on a film, and you wrote it and you critiqued it. And I think there's like a lot of the old guard is scared. I don't want to say scared, nervous that they'll be, replaced. And I can kind of and understand it because there's a new type of critic, and they're kind of mixed, influencers. And there's a lot of, strife with the influencers because sometimes it's hard to tell if they really like a movie or if a studio is just paying them to say they like a movie, or they're scared to say negative things about films because they don't want to lose their sponsorships. So I understand the trepidation, but I also think overall it's better that more people can be a part of this and not have to go through like all this stuff to just, write about film. Some people just have this, like, as when I was growing up, I just had the urge to write about stuff. I would read something and I would want to write about it, and I never got rid of that urge. And eventually it turned into being a film critic. But I do think there's a tendency for people to want to be the person with the hot take, because the negativity gets more attention. It gets you more social currency right now for some reason. I do think there's a little bit of an issue with media literacy. I think a lot of people, it might be a younger person thing, only because they just haven't seen a lot of stuff, right? The more things you see, the more it opens up your vision on things and more life experience you get. But a lot of people I find are watching films and taking everything literally that happens in the film as what the film is about. When obviously, yes, there are the literal events that are happening on the surface level, but there's also themes and subtext and allegory. And I think maybe the proliferation of like Marvel films and stuff where everything's very good, bad, black, white. There's no gray area in these type of films. People are having a little bit of trouble, watching a movie that has, a protagonist that might not be a good person, or somebody that doesn't have a redemption arc. Or maybe maybe the villain is a mixture of good and bad. I think people are struggling a little bit with that. And I also don't like where people say if you like a movie, that makes you a bad person, right?
Right.
Like if you watch a movie that's about a bad person and you like it, that you're somehow, saying it's okay to be a bad person. But that's fake, right? That none of that stuff's real. These are not real situations. So you can explore different types of feelings, some of them even evil, bad, upset, scared. You can explore a gamut of emotions through a film that you wouldn't experience in real life. That's the whole point of watching a movie, is to experience something outside of your normal, life. So that's my thought. I overall think film criticism is going to be fine. It's just going through a transitional phase, and everybody gets upset when stuff changes. So
the media literacy is a great point, and I think that even further than that, deep-seated, I think we're going to start seeing a problem with a just plain literacy problem. Mm-hmm. There's so many people that will I've seen, especially in like some of these, I hate to go back to social media, but like Facebook threads where people see either an article posted or a review posted of a film and read the first paragraph. And first off, not even truly read the first paragraph, but they're only responding to that paragraph, but then like missed words in sentences and not actually understanding what was being portrayed there. And I don't know how like we can recover from some of that. It's going to take a long time.
Yeah, I mean, there's just like there's a lot of where people will share an article and it's very obvious they only read the title of the article and didn't read any of the body of it. And there's a lot of another thing I don't like. Well, now I'm just like ranting, but another thing I don't
Rant
like.
Away.
What really grinds my gears is people that talk about movies they haven't seen in a definitive sense. I cannot stand that. And I've had so many times, because I go to a press screening, so I see stuff early, and people will legit argue with me about my view on a film. Like, you haven't fucking seen it. What are you arguing with me about? Like, watch the movie first.
Right.
Everybody's like, there will be like all these threads with people being pissed about a movie. It's not even out. This happened with Civil War so much. I was like, can we just wait for the goddamn movie to come out and let's all watch it? And then once we've seen it with our eyeballs, we can discuss what happened in the movie. or another thing I'll see is somebody will have not seen a movie and they'll read somebody else's review, and then they'll use that review to argue with you, and you're like, you haven't seen it. I don't know. It just really, it's one of my absolute biggest pet peeves is people who haven't seen a movie, like having a definitive opinion on its quality or talking about what's happening in it and they don't have context,
Well, and that happens with contemporary films all the time. But as somebody that works in physical media every day, the amount of people that do that for films that have been around for decades that they clearly haven't seen almost feels worse. And it feels like, I don't know if it's a generational thing, but I feel like we've passed down this level of gatekeeping where somebody gatekeeps themselves and they're not allowed to admit that they haven't seen a movie. Yeah. And it's like, we're not going to excoriate you for not having seen something. Just admit it.
Yeah, I do see that a lot where people, well, I think some of it is because sometimes if you say you haven't seen something, everybody's like, whoa, you haven't seen, and I'm like, there's hundreds of thousands of movies and you only live so long. And I work, 8 hours a day, every day. Like, you only watch so much stuff. And sometimes I have holes and I'm 100% open. I'm like, I all the time. Like last year I was like, watched Cliffhanger for the first time. And everybody was like, their heads were like, I'm like, I just never seen Cliffhanger. I don't know what to tell you, man. I never saw it. Now I seen it. Now I'm as cool as you. We're all cool now,
It's not even that good of a movie.
I know. I mean, I liked it, but I was like, I just, I'm still a good person, even though I didn't see Cliffhanger.
Right. Well, speaking of good people, not exactly. That was just my attempt at a funny transition. Why don't you tell everybody about Fatal Termination? Because I love that in what you've written about, this comes out of nowhere compared to Tangerine and Daryl. Man, this is a fun piece.
Yeah. So error 4444. I felt like I said too many fours. 4 fours.
That was 4.
They actually were interesting because this was early on in my essay career, and I like cold called them, with an email. I just sent them an email with a bunch of my work, and I said, hey, I know you guys are up and coming, just starting out. I would love to write essays for you. And they were very open to it. They were super cool. They also have a lot of women working on their stuff. I mean, it's I believe it's 2 men that run it, but they hire so many women to write things for them, do art, design. Like they hire a lot of women. And I was like, hey, and I told them, I was like, 2 of my specialities is, Hong Kong cinema and Japanese cinema. And so they said, well, here's a list of what we have coming out. Which one you want to write on? And one of them was Fatal Termination, and the other one was Funky Forest, both the Funky Forest films.
Yeah.
And I said, all right, so Fatal Termination, that movie's just wild. The thing with Fatal Termination was just the sheer audacity of everything that's going on in that movie. And it's famous, obviously, because of the stunt involving them, like, literally hanging a child outside of a moving car. Now, when you first watch it, it's edited very well. It looks more dangerous, I think, than it was. Not to say, that it wasn't reckless as fuck to do that, but I rewatched that scene a couple of times, and I realized they had undercranked it, so it looked like they were going slower than it looks, and then they made it look faster. But that kid is obviously scared out of her mind. She is, and I tried to look up about that kid. I couldn't really find anything. I'm like, did she survive? Did she do other stuff?
She's still traumatized to this day.
I was really worried about her well-being after that. Did she go to therapy? It's just such a harrowing stunt. And a lot of Hong Kong movies are like that, though. They're just the wildest shit that wouldn't roll now. But it's great that it got made, so you get to see it, and it's just, you don't see that kind of recklessness and just out of pocket stuff, and I really enjoyed writing about that one. That was a fun one.
It's a good piece, and one that explains just the overall tones behind some of these choices much more than people consider, I think, when watching some of these films. Because that scene's wild, but no, really, that scene is wild. Think about what had to be 15 at least people had to sign off on that.
And the child's parents, I assume, were okay with it. I don't know if they just gave him a bag of money and were like, she'll probably be okay. I don't, And a lot of
Emphasis on probably.
and a lot of Hong Kong films are fun just because of the tonal
Right.
whiplash you get from them. Because almost everyone I watch, it'll be like slapstick comedy, and then and then all of a sudden they'll just like graphically murder somebody, and then they'll be like essay scene, and then it's back to the comedy, and then there's like people slipping on banana peels, and then somebody's getting stabbed in the throat 3 minutes later, and you're just like trying to hold on, figure out what the fuck's going on in this movie, and it's like I love them for that. It's great.
I do as well, and yeah, Funky Forest Warp Forest was another release from Arrow 444, and then the other two. I mean, you got two coming out from Arrow that were just recently announced too. You got Mute Witness.
Yeah, Mute Witness and Narc. Mute Witness, I absolutely loved writing on. I was it's such a speaking of tone switching, that's another movie that does it. It's it starts out like pretty grim, I would say, and then it transitions into like a comedy of pretty much, and I was, it's just a lot of people aren't ready for that, but I think that's kind of what makes it infamous. I think it's that little bit of that tone switching. And that one I had fun writing about because I did a piece that was basically exploring mute women in cinema. So I picked some films that I thought were interesting, like older films that work up to like when Mute Witness came out. An exploration of why filmmakers are attracted to mute women, what it means, thematically in each film that I picked, working up to Mute Witness. So that was like a more fun kind of like esoteric style essay, which I like to do sometimes. Sometimes I do those types, and sometimes I do a really pointed one that's like just directly about the film. But sometimes I like to explore kind of around the atmosphere, the context, or other films that kind of play into this like overreaching like theme, that the film is trying to convey.
And then Narc coming out is the second HD release. Arrow putting it out on 4K. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say I write about crime films a lot, so I felt like that one was a really good challenge for me, because I don't usually write about mafia style films or crime films. It's just not that I don't like them, it's just not my wheelhouse. And I was like, wow, I would really enjoy stretching my legs with this one and write about it. And Narc is such a intense film, and it's filmed more art house than you would expect. And in rewatching that, I discovered that I don't dislike early 2000s aesthetic as much as I thought I did, and it's actually become nostalgic to me. I used to not like the way they looked. I felt like they looked tacky. But upon revisiting it, I realized that it's a really specific style and of style of editing, of color choice, and it's just. And Narc is like such a dark film, and it's more about two men trying to come to terms with things they've done in the past and how it affects their future, and trying to atone for things, and that sometimes, no matter how hard you try, like you can never escape those feelings of regret, and it has such a powerful ending. It's just such a good film, and it deserves a really nice release like that. And I was really happy to write about it. I loved exploring something that I usually don't,
I'm stoked that both of these specifically are getting releases. I feel like Mute Witness has been ripe for rediscovery for quite some time, and now we got this release coming out from Arrow. It just dropped on Shudder, and now finally people are talking about it. I'm like, yes, finally you can understand what we've all been talking about. This movie is amazing. You clearly, by looking behind you, love physical media like a lot of us. What kind of stuff do you collect? Are you into pretty much all types of films, or what are you buying nowadays?
Yes. It's kind of like a running joke on my Facebook that I have really eclectic tastes, because I post my hauls every once in a while as I collect them over the month or so, and it's always like it'll be like a vintage 70s porn, a Disney movie, and then it'll be like a 90s movie, and then an award-winning documentary, and then like some like dumpster trash I found at a thrift store that's like nobody's ever heard of. I blind buy a lot of movies too, and you'd think that I would come up across a lot of stuff I don't like, but I don't. Strangely, I can count on one hand the amount of times I've blind bought a film and I was like, I hated it. Like, it's just, I feel like it's fun. I don't know. I'll just go through my collection and then just pick out a random movie I haven't seen and watch it. I'm like, oh wow, it was amazing.
Yeah.
And when my boyfriend comes over, we have movie night. And another little thing that people like on my Facebook page, I call it my boyfriend picks a movie night, because he'll just go. And my boyfriend is not a film buff. He likes films, but he's not like into it like I am at all. So he just picks movies like the cover looks cool, stuff like that. And I find it's a cool way to like explore my collection through the eyes of somebody else, the way they would choose a film. And I love watching him go through, and he'll hold it up, and one time it was Sallow, and I've seen Sallow, he hadn't, and I said, and he's like, oh, what's this? It's like some kind of art house film. I was like, yeah, let's watch it. And he's just like, the whole movie, right? And then it's just fun to like see him expose himself to things like that. And it's fun. I don't really collect a whole lot of formats, like, I have some VHS and I have a couple laser discs, but it's almost pretty much DVD, Blu-ray, and 4K. And I'm not a big double dipper. If I have something on Blu-ray, I won't upgrade it to 4K. I only upgrade DVDs I have to the higher, because it's already too much money, and I just have to give myself some kind of like boundary so I don't go broke,
What are some of the releases of the last couple of years that have blown you away?
Recently I really liked the 4K of Conan that came out through Arrow. That was an absolutely beautiful release. I bought that the Dawn of the Dead release. Who did that? Second Sight. That big old monster collection. I ate that collection up. It was cool because it had versions of Dawn of the Dead I'd never really seen too. Like there was like, what do they call it, the library version or whatever.
Yep.
I watched, and it I was absolutely pristine. Like transfer, man. That's the best I've ever seen that movie look. I think it was the Second Sight that came up with that big ass drive.
Yeah.
I bought that. I absolutely love that set. That set was cool because Diabolique DVD, sometimes they sell like dinged, copies. So I got like some money off of it, and the ding was literally this tiny like little chip in the corner.
Yeah.
But how collectors are, they'll be like, oh, I don't want it in my collection. I'm like, send me all the dented shit. Like even if it's a little ripped or whatever, I'll just throw that slip cover away. I'll buy all that dented stuff. I love that release. The 4K for Showgirls from Vinegar Syndrome. Love that release. That movie is just amazing to me. It's just to think that it would just get this giant release like that, right? That's the fun of, we're like in the golden age of collecting, in my opinion, right now. What else did I like? Oh, I really liked Vinegar Syndrome's Freeway release. That's a really underrated movie. I feel like people used to talk about it a lot when it came out, and then you just never heard about it.
Yeah.
And that was funny. That was one of the movies my boyfriend picked for Boyfriend Picks Movie Night, and he was blown away. He loved it. He was like, "What the hell is this?" I was like, "You never seen Freeway?" So I enjoyed watching him, get his mind blown by that. But that's a few that I've liked recently.
Well, on the opposite end of the spectrum, as a critic, you're watching mostly contemporary films. So, what about on that front? What are a couple that have made you really excited then? And then following that up, what do you think is like the I don't know the best way to say this, but like, where do you think movies are currently headed? Because obviously we go through highs and lows of different trends. We go through different types of movies being made, and we were very prudish for a while. And one of the exciting things right now is where it seems like for a little bit we're open to talking about more taboo subjects.
Yeah. So the past couple of years were weird, right? Because we had COVID. So when COVID hit 2020, that was the weirdest year for movies ever. And it was actually really good for movies that probably wouldn't have got a spotlight normally, because the big studios were holding their stuff back because they wanted to make sure people had butts in theaters to see them, right? So there's a lot of low-key stuff coming out. I feel like there's a lot of... So the Marvel movies are kind of like petering out, right? And I feel like in general, the superhero genre is kind of like cresting downward slope.
Yeah.
So now we're seeing them trying to replicate that with other franchises, right? So now we have the legendary Godzilla movies, which I'm famous for not liking, and I didn't like Godzilla versus Kong either. But we also have stuff like Dune. Like Dune isn't something I would really think of as like a tentpole big
Right.
summer release. Dune, you know, it's like more like this, you know, philosophical kind of like nerdy sci-fi thing, right? But they kind of have to market things like it's all big franchise stuff. Seems like there's a lot of remakes coming out, reimaginings. That's even kind of hit video games too. There's a lot of remasters. But I feel like maybe it's like probably a little cheaper, I guess, to remake something or remaster something than to create something new. And also, you know, it's hard to get something new out there and people go see it because theaters are so expensive. People want to be careful with their money, so they'll go see something they know they'll like, right? Because nobody wants to spend $15 and hate whatever you're watching for 2 hours, right? So they're not going to take a chance on something that they might not like. I go see pretty much everything in the theater, so you know I see stuff I don't like. I have that like AMC Plus thing or whatever, so
nice.
It's actually it's, you know, if you want to watch movies a lot, I'm not like sponsored by them or anything. I'm just cheap, so and you can like, you know, see a lot of movies for a little bit of money. But people that don't have that, you know, and especially people that have kids or, you know, partners, it could cost you like $100 to go to the movies.
Real
and you spend $100 and everybody's like, oh, boo, it sucked, right? You know, they don't want that. So they have that to deal with. I've noticed also that they're re-releasing a lot of older films in theaters, which actually is cool because there's some movies I never saw theatrically that I get a chance to now. So that's cool. But I don't think like movies are dying. I feel like, you know, a lot of people are saying, you know, cinema's dead, all that.
Yeah.
A lot of people that say that, if you ask them how many new movies they've seen this year, it's not a lot, right? You have to look for those movies. You have to search. You have to put the effort in to see the good stuff. And there's still good stuff being made. There's still weird shit coming out. I just watched Sasquatch Sunset yesterday. It was fucking weird. It's about 4 Sasquatch. And like you're just watching them live their lives. It's like Sasquatch vibes, and nobody talks. They just grunt the whole movie. There's no dialogue, right? That's weird. You know, that's getting a theatrical release though. I saw a movie called Hundreds of Beavers earlier this year, and it's weird. It's like a silent film, you know, with people in beaver suits and Acme cartoon stuff. It's weird. Nobody really talks in that either, you know. But if you look for this stuff, there's really interesting artistic, creative stuff being made, but you got to look for it. You can't just write off all modern movies are bad if you don't put the effort into watching them, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, and people seem to react to the probably 35 movies that gets marketed to them very specifically throughout the year. Every year there's more than like 300 fairly like not just indie like shot on an iPhone in somebody's backyard, but 300 well thought out scripted with a crew type of films coming out at least every single year. It's hard to keep up with for anybody, but if you're just going to write everything off because of those 30 movies that got marketed towards you, you're probably the one with the hot take there.
Yeah, you know, I get it because everybody has limited time, but you know, and I'm in a little bit of a privileged position because I get press screeners and stuff, so I see things early. I see things people probably normally wouldn't. And there's other people that do a lot of film festival type stuff, which I don't do as much because my job, it's hard for me to get time off. But they see even more stuff. Sometimes those things don't even get picked up by distributors. It's just a movie in the ether, right? It's just in the cloud until somebody picks it up. So there's a lot of stuff out there. And I wish people would spend more time, you know, take a chance every once in a while, you know, and see something that you think you wouldn't like. And then maybe you might surprise yourself, you know. And I get, you know, not everybody has $15 to throw in the garbage if they don't like it. But I feel like even when I see movies I don't like, I learn something. I learn about like why don't I like it. I like to really, you know, deconstruct of what about it I didn't like, you know. And so you still learn a little something from it, even if you hated it.
Well, that's maybe probably the best way I could end this is we talked earlier about, you know, so many people are film critics nowadays and not being able to go to film school, like you had said. how did you learn to not, what's the best way to do this? Like, there is a very specific way to criticize film that isn't just I like it or don't like it.
Right.
And it is a talent. It is something that you can learn. It is something that can be taught. It is something that people have learned in school. It is something that people have learned through varying types of degrees. But in all reality, nowadays specifically, like, you can go on YouTube and learn a lot of this. So how did you go about it? How did you learn specifically the critical language?
Yeah, I literally just bought books about it. I bought books about literary theory, critical theory, there's whole books about how to write film reviews. Like, literally, there's just a whole book about how to construct. There's a smaller book that's literally just how do you construct your film review? Like, what do you, like, the literal grammatic and format, and I read those. I just any kind of critic I loved, I just ate their stuff up. I read as much as I could. And honestly, the best thing I can tell people that are trying to break into film criticism is you need to read. I'm sorry, but you got it. You just go online and type in top 10 books about film criticism or literary theory, and just like buy those books used, which I did. It's way cheaper. You can just go on Amazon and buy, or if you don't like Amazon because they're like a corporation and they're evil, you can go to your local bookstore, right? Your small bookstore, your used bookstore, and they always have like a film section, and you can go in there and just buy books about films and read them. That's all I did was honestly just read the stuff and then practice writing. Write. I write every single day, even if it's just a little bit, and I've been a critic, I would say a professional critic, for like 10 years, and I'll read reviews I wrote 10 years ago and I think they're awful. But that's how you learn. You can't be good at something unless you're bad at it first, right? And it's all practice, and you can learn how to write better and have somebody who you respect as a writer, if they have the time, hey, can you take a look at my review and tell me what you think of it? And don't get upset when people criticize your stuff. I had people, when I first started out writing, they were brutal about how my writing style was, and it blow to your ego, but you need it. You need that, like, brutality to make yourself better. You build yourself back better.
Right. That's a good point. One thing you brought up there that I would hate to just let go by, talking about being voracious readers of critics that you like. Who were some that inspired you?
Well, you got Roger Ebert, and people like to disparage him, I think, but he was like the critic's critic. He watched everything. He had, and it's funny because, like, one of my favorite genres is horror, and he was pretty famously not into horror movies, and he would, write some films that are considered horror classics. He like pooped on, right? So I like Walter Chaw is a contemporary one. He's amazing. He's incredibly articulate, very smart. I love the way that he pulls from history, right, to like contextualize films. Actually, I saw Southern Comfort that they just put out, and he did a commentary on it. It was fantastic, absolutely riveting commentary. He's another one I like. I like Kat's work a lot too. She writes. I liked her takes on sex and women and feminism and how all these things kind of like merge together. Because it's hard to find women writing about sex, I find, for some reason. Probably because there's a negative connotation when any type of woman tries to own sexuality or talk about sex. It gets like perverted, or people look down on them because, oh, women shouldn't talk about those things. And I love that she's very open about those type of things. Yeah, but those are just off the top of my head, some critics I really enjoy.
Walter Chaw, I was going to throw out too for anybody that's listening. If you are liking his stuff, not only has he done a couple for Vinegar Syndrome now, I think he's doing all kinds of stuff for Deaf Crocodile. He's been on like a handful of their releases because Craig's a big fan of Walt. Yeah, Kat is a good pull. She is. There's so many things you can say about Kat. She's helped a lot of people. She's touched so many different releases. She's been prolific in multiple venues at this point, so it's real easy to have her name just come up continuously. And I mean, honestly, it seems like you're taking some steps to be there yourself. I've appreciated your work, and I hope to see a hell of a lot more of it over the next couple of years.
I appreciate it. I appreciate you having me on too.
Happily. If anybody wants to follow Michelle, I have all the links for everything in the description below. And thanks for hanging out, and hopefully we can talk again.
All right, see ya.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Disconnected Podcast. There's one big thing that you could do to help the show, and that is to leave a rating and review on the podcast service of your choice. Thank you.
I am Adam Lundy, co-host of They Live by Film, a podcast dedicated to bringing you film discussion and interviews from around the world. Every week, my co-hosts Chris Haskell, Zach Bryant and I discuss a wide range of films, from monumental classics like Vertigo and The Rules of the Game, to the craziest, schlockiest movies ever made like Deathbed and everything in between. We are also lucky enough to have sat down with some of the biggest players in the boutique Blu-ray and film restoration game. If this is your thing, then come hang out with us every Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern, wherever you normally stream your podcasts, and now as part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.